Okay, here's my intro. Let me just erase that right there and go simple. My name A-Z. No, I don't like that. A-Z-I-Z-A-K-I-B-I-B-I. Hey, 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 I'm Aziza Kibibi and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about the fine line between gratitude and settling. But before I get into that, I want to give a warm, loving, excited shout out to all of my subscribers. Thank you so much for your support, for your well wishes, for watching and sharing my videos, for getting the conversation going in the comment box. And if you are not already subscribed, make sure you do that. Please like and share this video because my goal on my channel is to open up dialogue and conversation. Well, technically that's the same thing, but to get conversation going about sensitive issues, because it is those sensitive issues that have to be handled, confronted, fixed, worked on, in order for us as spiritual beings having a human experience to get the most out of this human experience and really improve on our quality of life. So, the inspiration for this video was an ex of mine. Hi, ex of mine. And if you don't know my background, I'll just briefly share. So I am a mom, an activist, an author, a chef, a philanthropist, and a writer. I'm a published author. I wrote my book, Unashamed, A Life Tainted, volumes 1 and 2, that in the book chronicles my life surviving abuse at the hands of my father, my biological father. Throughout the abuse that started at 8 years old, over the years I had 4 children for him, 5 pregnancies, but 4 actual births, who he actually delivered at home. So I have been on various talk shows and radio shows and, just really raising awareness on child molestation, incestuous abuse, and domestic violence, and everything that comes along with that, which is spiritual abuse and financial abuse, narcissistic abuse. And I find that the more I speak about these things, then the more encouragement that it gives to other survivors of abuse. And also it could help empower people who are still being victimized. So, needless to say, being sexually abused at a very young age and for a very long time could kind of give a person some issues. Now, over the years, I have worked through a lot of those issues, and one specific issue, of course, had to do with having a relationship. Having relationships in general, not only dealing with relationships with men, but also relationships with women. Platonic relationships with women, platonic relationships with men, romantic relationships with men. I mean, my relationship with myself, all of these things were affected by the trauma that I experienced as a child and adolescent and as a young adult. So when I talk about gratitude versus settling, I have hands-on experience because after escaping my father and just being afraid of the world, essentially, I was homeschooled. I wasn't socialized. In the process of escaping my father, my children were taken away from me. So that had its own trauma associated with it. My caseworker with the state was racist. So I was just all of this stuff was just thrown at me through the process of escaping my father. So, okay, years later, got my kids back. Finally, I killed that. Okay. Years later, got my kids back. trying to establish myself and my family, trying to care for them. And, you know, I had seen my dad, who was polygamous, have relationships with women, and a lot of different women who seemed to be very happy in their relationship with my dad, even though he was abusive to me and my sisters and my brother and my mom. He would have various different types of relationships with other women. And some of these women were really crazy about him. They never saw his abusive side. So, of course, now being out into the world, seeing images of, you know, a knight in shining armor that comes and saves the princess up in the tower, and them living happily ever after, the American dream of having a wonderful loving marriage and 2 kids and a white picket fence. Like, all of these things, of course, are appealing. And I think they are innately appealing to humans. So I wanted that. Of course, I wanted that for myself. I was intentional in not allowing the trauma that I experienced, both physical and sexual, control the happiness that I felt like I had a right to have, just like everyone else in the world, and just like other people that I knew and that I saw was experiencing. So I went on a quest. I went on a quest to learn my body, learn my own desires, learn what I liked, what I disliked, what my limits were, and get to know people. So, of course, that was a long process. I do talk about that in some of my other videos. But one thing that I have noticed, and this has been inspired, it was sparked by recent contacts that I have had with this particular ex, and how different I am now compared to what I was back then when I first escaped my father, and I was not confident, and I was uneducated, and I didn't know any better, essentially. So many of you might be familiar with the term savior syndrome. If not, savior syndrome is when a person, a man usually, has a complex where they are drawn to damaged women who they feel like they can save. And through that saving, then there creates a dependency in the relationship. The Urban Dictionary calls it Captain Save-A-Ho. Even the knight in shining armor archetype kind of pulls from that whole, you know, savior syndrome. Now, what is a little less known is the rescued. So the rescued would be the opposite of the savior, which would be basically what the savior is drawn to. So the rescued is a type of male or female who is damaged in some way, whether it be through trauma, most of the time it probably is through trauma, but life experiences, and they want to be rescued, and they're insecure oftentimes. And then you put these two people together, and there's like this codependency that can be toxic. Though in theory, I feel like it might work. I don't know, but according to psychologists, it's kind of like this toxic, parasitic type of relationship, which, you know, most people think is probably not very good. Now, when I bring up the topic of gratitude versus settling, the reason why I think about my own situation is because in this ex that inspired this video, because I had suffered so much abuse from my father, I had gotten involved, and I thought I fell in love with this person. It might have been maybe 2 years after I escaped him, but I escaped my father. But I had gotten involved with this person, and though looking back now, I recognize that he did not treat me very well. But at the time, what I thought he did in our relationship what he contributed to my life, well, I guess you can say what he didn't contribute to my life, because at the end of the day, in short, I was just happy he wasn't beating me. I was just happy he wasn't sexually assaulting me. You see what I'm saying? So I was a little confused. Like, my perspective was off, because while I imagined what two people in a loving relationship should be and should experience, I had gotten settled into the idea, well, what basic little bit of things that he was doing was amazing, because at least I was not living in fear. So I can definitely say I had a little bit of rescued syndrome, and I definitely think he was kind of, Captain Save-A-Ho, and he did not give me what I really deserved. Now, it took some time for me to recognize that, because then I realized how much I was constantly putting into the relationship myself. I mean, you want to talk about what you bring to the table. I was bringing the freaking table, the food, cooking it, the chairs, like the silverware, everything. And I was going above and beyond, because I was, one, thankful and grateful, right? We're going back to the gratitude, that he wanted to even have a relationship with me, because I had been trained by my father that no one would want me. So that was one. And then two, just like I said earlier, thankful that he wasn't assaulting me in any way. Even though in many ways he was probably using me, but it didn't feel like that, because I was coming from a place that was so extremely opposite. So, recent contact got me thinking how different I was back then compared to how I am now, and recognizing that a lot of the things that I tolerated in the relationship was really because I was so grateful that it wasn't as bad as I know that it could get. And I recognize that. And I know I did recognize that back then, but it took time. And it continued to take time over the years, because it kind of came up in my other relationships. Even with my husband. Yes, I did actually fall in love with my husband. He was like my best friend. We had so much fun together. But I didn't recognize all of the signs of him being unfaithful and him using me again, because my comparison was of a place that was so bad. So even with him, I compared him to my previous relationship, which was the one about the ex that has inspired this video. I compared him to that relationship, and that relationship was then compared to the abuse that I suffered at the hands of my father. So I find that this plays out in many other aspects of our lives. For instance, your job. You could be just happy that you have a job, period. Especially if you worked hard to get one. Like, I feel like young people that get their first job usually are more tolerable of the BS within the workforce, because they're just happy they have a job. And of course, if you're, say, a struggling single mom, then it's more important to you to keep your job and have an income to put food on the table for your children, because they're at risk as well, than actually being happy in your job. So that's where the settling comes in. I think a lot of people tend to settle for their situations, especially if they're coming from a place of struggle or difficulty. Then they settle for something that seems less like a struggle. And I think that plays out in the places that we live, your work, your interaction with your family. Like, if you have, I think one thing specifically that people who have been traumatized in whatever way do struggle with is then really demanding their worth and their value and getting what they deserve and getting what they want. Like, I deserve to have what I want. Now, I do think that my life experiences has taught me appreciation, empathy, sympathy, understanding of others. It has definitely, I think I am a little more emotionally mature than some others that I have run into, and not necessarily because of the trauma itself, but because of the work that I have done to heal from that trauma. And in turn, I have the ability to make good judgment calls, and contribute my energy and live out my purpose, intentionally live out what I believe my purpose is in this life. I should be rewarded. Like, I have to accept that. And during the time of the abuse that I suffered, I really felt like I didn't deserve anything. I mean, my father led me to believe like I should be happy that he is even showing me attention, period. And that was something that I had to work through. So yes, in my adulthood, after suffering so much hardship, I had to be okay with saying that I deserve to have the things that I want. Not just the things that I need. We all deserve to have the things that we need. Like, we all deserve to breathe. We need oxygen, we need food. Those are just the basics. And we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, the very basics should be equal and available to every human being. But then when you go to the next level on the hierarchy of needs I'm talking about, in order to reach the top of self-actualization, it gets to the point where you don't only deserve what you need, but you deserve what you want, especially if you are an evolving human. You know, I don't know if my dad's sitting in jail right now for 90 years deserves what he wants. Clearly, he's done a lot of damage. But for those of us who has good intentions, you know, we deserve to have what we want, especially if we've been through some messed up stuff. When we talk about gratitude versus settling, the settling part, because we are so grateful for not suffering, the settling kind of comes automatically, right? Well, it's good enough. Good enough is good enough. Well, I'm here to tell you good enough is not good enough. Okay? If you recognize and you can consciously say good enough is good enough, then that means you're settling. If you can say good enough is good enough, then that means you are settling. So I'm going to ask a favor of you. Go and look up the rescued. Go and look up rescued in psychology. Usually it's associated with savior syndrome because they kind of go hand in hand, like they're codependent. And let me know, there is a breakdown of different levels of rescue. There's a breakdown of different levels of Captain Save-A-Ho. So look it up, do a little research, tell me what you think, and go down in the comments and share if you can identify. Now, I know this is a little revealing, but remember, y'all, we are here to grow and learn and progress. And on that note, again, I am Aziza Kibibi. Please remember to like, follow, subscribe, and be blessed, for you are a blessing. Catch you next time. Bye.